Hey everyone, this is Dayu from EcommOps. Today I'm going to talk about current logistics disruptions that are really messing up global trade, and they are from the lingering impacts of COVID. However, it's not exactly the same as before, and they may not be exactly what you think it is. So let's get started. Now, if you're in e-commerce before, you probably remember during COVID, there were a lot of issues with air freight and direct from China to the world fulfillment using air. And that was because of a severe shortage of passenger planes because of all the flight restrictions. Now, as COVID stabilizes, planes are increasingly flying again, and there's always been freight planes going back and forth. So roughly speaking, now supply and demand for air and direct fulfillment has roughly stabilized. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than before. But now the problem is with the sea. A little bit of background first for those who don't know about sea freight. In terms of sea freight, from US to China, roughly 50% of the capacity goes to just two ports, the port of LA and the port of Long Beach, which are, by the way, right next to each other. Now, as COVID started improving, there was a lot more traffic because of the demand of additional goods from China as people started buying a lot more stuff again. In February of 2021, there was more than a 40% increase in sea freight traffic on containers into those ports. Because of all that traffic, and honestly they were understaffed as well, there was sometimes an average of 10-day delays just to get stuff through, even once the boats got to the ports. And it just caused a lot of issues that were completely unexpected in the US. So for example, I mean, there's apparently there's been a boba shortage. I don't know if you guys drink boba or milk tea, but there was a shortage of tapioca balls from Taiwan, even though there was no production shortage, and that was because of this freight shortage. Something really unexpected happened, and that was an extreme shortage of containers. Not container ships, not container capacity, but literally containers. The big middle boxes that actually hold the freight. So just a quick intro to how sea freight usually works is that sea freight, all the goods get put into these large, massive containers ranging from 20 foot to 40 foot and packed on these massive ships. And they get shipped from China to the destination country, the EU, US, wherever, and they get unloaded, and they usually get loaded back with goods in these same containers, and the ship goes back to China or some other country and uses those containers again to ship trade goods to the other country. So what happened last year? Well, China obviously was the first that got hit with COVID, but they were also the first to recover quite early as well. And production started again, exports started again. Meanwhile, in the US and the EU and elsewhere, that was when COVID hit. That was when the lockdown started happening. And those in e-commerce probably actually remember there was huge demand for goods during that time. People were home, they still need to spend money, so they were just buying a lot of stuff. And that caused huge demands of goods to be exported from China into the US or into the EU, causing all of this container traffic. And on top of that, there were just so much demands for face masks and PPEs, and China was producing them for the world basically. I mean, that production wasn't happening at high enough speeds everywhere else. So basically, increased consumer demand and massive demand for PPEs and face masks caused this massive volume of sea freight going from China into the US and into the EU. Now, herein lies the problem. There was so much demand for these containers going into the US and the EU, but there was very, very little demand for trade going the other direction, partly because of restrictions and just, partly just because of this great trade imbalance as well. And basically what was happening was that these ships were dropping off these containers, they were getting unloaded, and they were empty, and there was no demand for them to be brought back because there was no goods to be actually sent back. On top of that, the port workers, they were so busy, and a lot of them were starting to get sick, they were getting quarantined, they were short-staffed, that they literally didn't have enough time to even unload ships, and they certainly didn't have enough time to put empty containers back on the boats. So one, there was no demand for these containers going back, and two, even if the boats wanted to take these empty containers back, which a lot of boats don't want to, by the way, there was just no time to put them back on again, and this caused a massive glut of empty containers in the EU and particularly in the US. In North America, for example, during that period, only 40 out of 100 containers were unloaded and then actually sent back with goods. So out of every 100 containers, 60 containers were just stuck. And now they're just stuck all over the place. I mean, they're stuck in inland depots, just massive amounts of empty containers near the ports with basically nowhere to go. I mean, I don't think anyone has any idea what to do with them because there's still so much demand from China to the US, for example, but there's just not enough demand to bring those empty containers back. And you still have the issue where the ports are so busy that they don't even want to deal with bringing empty containers back. So even if the ships wanted to, they were going back empty without the containers, by the way. Here is the kicker, by the way, is that the majority of production of these containers are actually in China. Now, the industry for producing these containers, it's usually a very stable industry. It's not an industry that typically ramps up or ramps down very quickly. There's always a stable need for containers. Now, because of this severe shortage from China, there was a huge shortage in production as well. Now, the thing is, these factories started actually making a lot more money because they started actually driving the prices of containers up, and these factories aren't really going to ramp up production super fast because that's going to cut into their margins as well, and who knows when this is going to be over. So they're actually really slow or pretty flat in terms of their production of these empty new containers to be even used for freight purposes. And this even had a huge impact on the raw cost of new containers themselves. So for example, traditionally a 20-foot container might cost $1,800 just for the empty container itself. Now it's about doubled, and it might keep increasing as well. That's just for the container without anything in it. And all of this had massive impact. So we already talked about the delays that are still going on right now, average 10 days or more sometimes. And it also made the prices of sea freight amazingly high. So this is a chart of the average cost of freight. So not just containers, but containers with freight into it going to various destinations. So the average back before in June of 2020, and by the way, June 2020 was actually during the COVID peak, if you remember, that was under $2,000 on average routes. Now, currently, as of June of 2021, it's more than $6,000, $6,500. That's a 3 to 4x increase. This is an almost unprecedented increase in the price of average shipping using sea freight around the world. And as you see in this chart, it's just been increasing and increasing. And honestly, I can't really tell you that it's going to stabilize anytime soon. Maybe it's peaked, but most experts believe that sea freight prices, because of all these issues, are going to remain extremely high around this level, or maybe even higher, for at least through the end of the year and most likely into the next. And what's at the end of the year? That is Q4, and this is going to be posing a big problem for a lot of businesses who depend on sea freight imports. Honestly, don't listen to anyone who's going to tell you that sea freight is going to somehow decrease before the end of the year. It's going to fluctuate maybe, but betting that it's going to decrease, waiting until it decreases so you can get better prices, that's going to be more or less like gambling. It might happen, but signs are it's really not going to happen until maybe later next year. All right, so what do you do about this? So if you usually depend on sea freight, especially for your goods going to the Q4, you should really get a quote from a freight forwarder as soon as possible. You don't want to all of a sudden be surprised when your freight costs are 4 times higher when it comes to September, when you're actually starting to ship goods out for Q4. And you should really work out those numbers and just see if the margins using sea freight still make sense for you. Traditionally, sea freight is going to be one of, if not the cheapest way to move goods across the world. But now because of this, the economics are going to be completely different depending on the weight and size of your product. So if you use sea freight, if you plan to this year, definitely don't wait. Get a quote right now and bake that into your costs, your unit economics, your calculations, and you should just assume that it's going to stay like that or even get worse when you evaluate your options. And don't forget, sea freight usually is cheap, but it also has terrible lead times that are only longer now. What might be 2 weeks before could be 3 to 4 weeks. You got to plan for that as well, and that's still a major downside. Air freight has been increasing a bit, but not nearly as much as sea freight. So this is where you might start considering if air freight makes sense for you, even if it didn't before. And also, direct fulfillment from China using something like UnExpress, for example, it has really stabilized. The pricing is still a little bit higher than it was before COVID. However, it's a lot better than the peak of COVID, and the speeds now are, for most major countries, they're really close to what they were before COVID, sometimes maybe just a day or two slower than before COVID. So it's really looking a lot stable now. So if you haven't before, definitely direct from China fulfillment is something you should look into as well. And by the way, we at EcommOps, we specialize in direct from China fulfillment. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely reach out and talk to us. We'll put the link below. If you have steady volume, definitely talk to us. All right, well, that's a quick video. A lot of people have been asking me what is going on with sea freight costs, and this is what it is. So hope that was helpful. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, join our Facebook group as well. This is Dayu from EcommOps. See you guys next time.